Today on campus, it's 1988. The first inkjet printers are out to help us work more efficiently. The first mobile phones are released, bringing us closer than ever. And the first permanent international internet connection, called the World Wide Web, allows information to be shared around the globe. Yes, this was the year of so many life-changing advancements. But then, in November, the rug is pulled from beneath it all, and one man unleashes the first major malware code, the Morris worm. It kills thousands of computers around the world, causing as much as $10 million in damages. And so, once again, we are painfully reminded that the moment we think we are close to having it all solved, there's always that one person who can knock it all back down. A hard reality that was learned by an eager student at a tiny college of art and design in Minneapolis, taking a brutal class called Typography 101. This is Once in College. I'm Pete Griffith. I bear witness to today's episode, as I was the 18-year-old idiot who trudged through it. I've been cajoling others so much to share their stories, I thought it was about high time to put my money where my mouth is. So, this is one of my college experiences. If I had more time, I'd try to build it up more, but thankfully, class is about to begin. I started my second sophomore semester in a basement apartment during a frigid winter in Minneapolis. The long days held little sunshine, but what depressed me the most at the time was having to take a course titled Type 101. Mark was the first person to cast a dreary light on the class. He was one of my first friends at campus and remains a lifelong mensch of mine to this day. Today, he sits in his California home in his warm, sunny studio, creating many of the amazing effects you see in Hollywood franchises like Star Trek, Star Wars, and Transformers. Back then, he noodled around on his synthesizer and sported a mean mullet. His first words to me when I showed up on campus wearing a jeans outfit from head to toe was to sarcastically say,
Nice Canadian tuxedo.
I trusted him ever since. So when I told him I was taking Type 101, and he simply lowered his head and let out a long, measured, agonizing breath of air, I knew I was in for a heap of pain. Type 101 is basically 8 weeks of discussions revolving around how to position letters next to each other, debating the intricacies of how much space you should put above and below sentences, the creative thrill of using capitals, or not, for dramatic effect. I was a design student and loved visual puzzles, but at the time, Type 101 seemed to be tedious enough to be one of Dante's concentric circles of hell, one of the lower levels. The night before the first class, anxiety kept me awake. 5 beers put me to sleep. 2 feet of Minnesota snow then quietly dumped from the stars, and a rather stealth snowplow snuck by, packing it all tight up against the window of my northern-facing bedroom. Not one ray of morning sun snuck in, and I slept until noon, missing the first class altogether. Did I sleep in because of the snow? As they say in Minnesota, you betcha. Did I sleep in because I just didn't want to go to Type 101? Also, you betcha. Needless to say, I overcompensated for all this by walking into the first class. Okay, second class. Acting overly confident. Cocky, to be honest. Problem was, the professor carried herself with even more of that same swagger, and our first battle was afoot. Surprisingly, I was inspired with her first assignment. She gave us a short, 10-word quote, and it was epic in how she conjured up so much images in my head. We were to enhance or bring added meaning to the quote by only changing the design of the letters, We couldn't add pictures or change any of the words. We were just to modify the size, shape, or design of the individual letters. I ran back to my room, inspired to create something incredible. In my head, the quote sounded like the author was an angel. So, for some reason, I found it interesting if you literally flipped all that and made it a line spoken by the devil. So, I cut out the quotation marks at each end of the line with an X-Acto knife, tripled their size on a copy machine, and pasted them back on either end of the quote, only upside down. In this manner, their dangling legs now pointed up, one going left, one going right, resembling the pointy horns of a devil surrounding the words in between. And for added measure, I colored them a deep, bright red. I was so full of myself and my solution that I just didn't think of laughing like a maniacal villain. I actually did, out loud. And my roommate joined in just for kicks. The next class, I tacked up my work on the wall with everyone else for the professor's critique. Her reaction of what I had done was a little more measured than others. And by that, I mean she literally lowered her head, let out that same measured breath of air like Mark had, and skipped by it to the next student's work hanging on the wall. She wouldn't return to it until she had finished with all the others. Before the days of being able to instantly find out anything you wanted to know online, you actually had to go to a bookstore or a library to research things. Things like quotes. Now, if I had, I would have known that the quote was intended to be heavenly. In fact, the author likens the meaning to the humanity of God, literally. The professor did a thorough job of pointing that fact out as she critiqued my work, while she rubbed her necklace and tiny golden cross with a tiny golden Jesus nailed to it between her thumb and middle finger. I don't remember how I responded, but I remember defending my work passionately, like a heretic standing up to God herself. In doing so, I made a solid impression, and my grade went from a strong D- to a rock-solid F. I vowed on the next assignment, and re-vowed on the two after that, not to give up and stick to my artistic guns. I doubled down on our disagreements, and I stood up for what I felt was right. I fell on my sword, as they say, each time harder than the last. At the end, I was leaping off the corner post of a wrestling ring and doing a full Monty belly flop onto it. And, for my heroic efforts, I was given a C- for the first assignment, and flat out failed the next two. This pattern painfully continued over the next 6 weeks. I turned in what I thought was right from my perspective. She judged the work from her perspective, and, well, as was her right as the professor, she always won. I spent the rest of the course meandering through 3 of the 4 stages of rejection in slow-mo. First, denial, then anger, then an excruciating long period of bargaining. In the end, I flunked the class. If it isn't a well-known truth already, let me put it out there. Law school, med school, these are filled with hard classes that extremely smart people fail. Nobody I know has ever failed an art class, except me. The bruise to my ego was painful. Afterwards, going to parties with everyone who'd taken the class with me was excruciating. I never told Mark, and I formulated how I would keep this from my parents. But that wasn't the worst of it. Type 101 was a required course for my major. I had to take the exact same class over again if I was to graduate. Same exact curriculum, same exact assignments, with the exact same teacher. I was to learn how to swallow my pride. Crow was on the dinner table, and I was to eat a lot of it. The last stage of processing rejection kicked in. I had to accept it and move on. Since I knew what she liked, there seemed to be only 2 ways to get back into the battle and face my foe. I was to either give the professor exactly what she wanted, or be true to myself, relive the same painful experience, and probably fail the course, only to have to retake it again. The morning I walked in the first class of Type 101 for the second time, okay, technically the third time, I honestly did not know what I was going to do. And then, a miracle. For some reason, my arch enemy was not there. Instead, a skinny man in his late 30s was sitting at the professor's desk. He introduced himself as the new professor and laid out the class curriculum. It was the exact same course and the exact same assignments to the letter. In fact, the first assignment that was due was interpreting the exact same quote by only modifying the design of the letters or words. I skipped home, literally looking like a fool on the campus quad. And when I got home to the safety of my basement dorm room, I did something at that moment that I think you can only do in college when you are still young and often dumb and have no perspective in the consequences of risking everything. I decided that very next class, I would turn in the exact same answer that I had turned in the first time. I had kept it for some reason, devil horns and all. The day came to put our assignments up on the wall. Everyone from the previous class had easily passed, so nobody there knew me or my work. Still, my hands were trembling as I tacked up my previously displayed assignment, and I think this time I took a long, measured breath. When the new professor came around to my work, he paused for a moment like the previous professor had done. Only his pause was brief. He simply chuckled and then uttered one word.
Brilliant.
And then moved on down the line. For the next 7 weeks, I turned in the exact same assignments that I had turned in the first 7 weeks of taking the course. I had kept them all. This time, however, the final outcome was different. I passed with a solid B. Type 101 was the hardest class I ever took. Not because of the assignments or curriculum, not because I failed it and had to take it all over again, but because in taking it, I had to learn the hard way that the correct answer is not always determined by what the actual answer is, but more often by who the person is judging it. We like to judge. It's human nature. We even prefer human judgment more than undisputable scientific data. In sports, figure skating and gymnastics are by far the most watched and closely followed events at the Olympics. And what do they share in common? Winners are not determined by clocks and tape measures, but by judges. And even then, the judging criteria is fickle. Whatever tuck, turn, leap, or spin may be in vogue or rewarded the most one year often goes out of fashion the next. If there was only one true, indisputable answer in life, we would only need to buy one color or style of shirt for the rest of our lives. We would only need to read one account of history and never have to read another version of it. We would only listen to a single song and never hear the notes of another. Human judging has even crept into mathematics. Old school math taught us 2 + 2 = 4. The only undisputable answer is 4, and the entire credit for that answer was based on that singular number. But the new math is all about showing your work. Your grade is no longer based on the answer, but the way in which you arrived at it. The hardest thing to do is to try and please everyone. There are 8.2 billion judges in the world, and any answer you come up with will either please or piss a bunch of people off. The best judge that you should use as your barometer is the one you can live with, yourself. And for many, that is one of the hardest lessons to learn. Today's episode was produced by Rob Wallace and myself, with Michael Henry at the helm of our final mix. If something you heard today reminded you of a time in college, we'd love to hear about it. Failed a class yourself? Feel free to bitch about it. Been unfairly judged at college? We'd love to hear that too. We're always looking for unique or unusual stories that happened on or off campus. And we know some of the most memorable things you learn in college aren't found in books or lectures. Oh, which reminds us. I want to thank Rob Wallace again for being objective and helping me cobble this episode together. I'm sure more than once he had to take a long, measured breath of his own before providing me with his insightful reactions. Of the 8.2 billion judges in the world, I'd put him up there in my top 0.0001%. He made us remember that everything in life is subjective. So no matter who tries to put you down, the only person you need to please is yourself. You know the gig from here. Give us a like if you'd liked any of this, or share this episode with someone you went to school with. And if you want to hear more stories like this at the moment they come out, please subscribe to our podcast. It really, really helps us more than you'd ever think, more than our GPAs ever did. Until then, I'm Pete Griffith, back next week with more stories like this, all from a time once in college.